Hello and welcome back to our newest episode of One Coffee With. Today we are here with Frederik Ferié in your favorite Café Kliewe. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time and your patience, and thank you for trying out this new format with us.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, we too. We're excited for your interesting answers. But first, if you could briefly introduce yourself, who are you and what sparked your interest in marketing?
My name is Frederik Ferié. I'm one of the assistant professors at the Marketing Center in Münster, at the chair of marketing management. And I teach Marketing Analytics 1 in the bachelor's program, and I teach a seminar in the master's program.
Okay, thank you. So you all know who you're listening to now.
Yeah, and so my interest in marketing was actually sparked by, I would say, my general interest in human behavior.
Ah, yeah.
And so I actually decided to focus on marketing quite early in my studies because I found it super interesting to find out what actually motivates people to buy or not to buy, and what to buy, and generally how to behave in the marketplace.
I do really understand that.
Thank you.
Besides that, you are well known for your love of coffee, and we are here at Kliewe. Why did you choose this place?
Well, I got hired by the Marketing Center in late 2020, and previously I had lived in Berlin for more than a decade, and one of my first thoughts was, okay, so if I go to Münster, where can I have great coffee? And there are already some really good coffee shops out there, so I knew about the Röstbar, then I later found out about Café Kliewe, two other excellent spots, and then at some point, actually a student assistant of mine told me, oh, there's a new coffee spot opening on Hammerstraße, and I was walking by and I saw the machine that they had on the shelf, the coffee that's on the shelf, and that actually really excited me because, and I hope that can be actually seen in the background here, Kliewe is a multi-roaster shop. So in coffee parlance, that means that they don't only have one roaster. Currently, I think I just count about 9 different roasters on the shelf, and that's quite unique in Germany. So even in Berlin, where I'm from, we only have a couple of multi-roasters. So Kliewe, even for all of Germany, is rather unique. On top of that, super nice staff, highly professional. You get great coffees here.
Amazing! So you all know where you should drink your next coffee. If our research is correct, you have been an undergraduate here in Münster. How is it compared to teaching? How is it on the other side now, learning, teaching?
Yeah, so actually I started my studies here in Münster as an undergrad, also did part of my grad student work here, and then later went for a PhD in Berlin. And well, to be honest, Münster now compared to Münster back in the day is actually not that different. So coming back, there's a lot of things that I do recall from being similar back in the day. For example, the lecture halls, the H1 has not really changed much. The Aula am Aasee, so that's the two of my major halls where I'm teaching Marketing Analytics 1. They are very, very similar, and so it is quite funny to be on the other side and not being one of like 400 to 700 people sitting in the crowd, but being the one actually on stage.
I do imagine that to be really, really exciting, fun.
It's exciting, and also because I still very much remember how it was back in the day to be a student, and it's not that that long ago. So one of the things that I always found a bit worth of improvement was that back in the days as a student, I sometimes just felt like a number. The lecturers maybe just know your matriculation numbers. When they see your name in the exam sheets, maybe they recall your name. But that's something as an undergraduate that I found could be worth improving. And of course, I can't, as a lecturer these days, make my lectures smaller because, we have 700 or even more than 700 students who come in every year and who have to take Marketing Analytics 1 as a lecture. But something that I'm actually striving to do, that I'm trying to do, is really to have students more present, and actually also to gives them the feeling that they're seen, also with their names. So when you, for example, interact with me during a lecture, or when you answer our quizzes that we do, when you participate, and we do get to know your name, we actually will not forget that. And even though, I mean, it's not meant as a threat, but basically we really like to interact with students, and given the limited possibilities that we have, considering how many students we have, we really try to make those times when we can interact with students count. And believe it or not, so when you actually give this lecture, it's not always 700 students showing up. Sometimes it's more like 300 or 400. And you do actually realize after some time when somebody is missing, like you actually get to know the faces.
I always wondered that. Do they see that we're here, or are we just like a random face they're talking to? So that's super interesting to know.
Almost definitely, and something that I also really enjoy is, and I always tell that to my students after each lecture I'm teaching, is that if we ever should meet again somewhere around the world, like at an airport, at a train station, I always get a kick out of students or former students actually approaching me and say, hey, I took your lecture, I really didn't like it, or ideally I liked it. And so that's really something that I enjoy. It's a privilege to teach in Münster. It's a privilege to be exposed to so many amazing students that early in their career. I mean, we have had unicorn founders, we have had DAX company CEOs and CMOs among our students, and I think it's a great privilege to be allowed to teach students at this level. And then maybe in 20 years from now, if there's a CMO or CEO approaching me at the airport, and then she tells me, oh, I was in your lecture, then I really feel that I could maybe contribute a little bit to that. And it's great to see students thrive later in their lives.
That feels really great to hear as a student coming, well, from my perspective. Now that you've mentioned marketing analytics quite a lot, and I think from my point of view, I'm the third semester now, so I'm looking forward to visiting the course next semester. All the bachelor students, well, we all know the term marketing analytics, and we all know that we gotta do it. But what exactly is it? What can we expect?
Well, you can expect quite a lot, also not meant as a threat. But basically what we're trying to do is we are trying to help managers making better decisions. And we are using data for that. So basically, you will find out what data is and how you can read data. You can read data descriptively. You can also analyze data with inference methods. And basically, you find out, and you will hopefully learn, in how to enable better decision making. And that's something that when I was a student back here, both in my undergrad and also in my later in the first part of my master's program, I, to be honest, did not have the best methodological training, and I felt that I was really lacking that training, not only later when I started with my PhD, but also when I worked in practice. Because suddenly people ask you, okay, so how should we decide? Like when you're on a job, when you're in an internship, so what's the better decision or the best decision, and how can you actually find that out using data? And I would have wanted to have a better education at that, and right now I'm working on hopefully providing these opportunities to you as students.
Wow, well, I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys do that as well.
Thank you very much. I hope you will still say the same thing after you've written the
we
exam.
can meet after and we can talk about it.
If you're still willing to talk to me then, yes.
Hopefully.
Me too, hopefully, for me too, yeah.
Well, you just mentioned your PhD.
Yeah.
And now you talked a bit about like the way you lecture. But what interested a student was, well, looking back on all of your academic successions and your journey overall, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced academically, and how did you overcome them? Do you have any tips?
Yeah, so actually what I just mentioned, so the situation where I suddenly started my PhD, so I graduated from my master's program, then worked in politics for a couple of years, and then decided to go back to uni to work on a PhD program, to work in a PhD program to get a PhD. And I realized that in order to accomplish the kind of research that is demanded from PhD students at that level, my education simply wasn't good enough. So I lacked the methodological skills. And then I was sitting in my office in Berlin Friedrichshain and thinking like, okay, so how do I learn this? And I think this situation might be quite familiar to students also in the undergrad program. Like when they go to the lecture, they go through the lecture material, and then they realize, well, I don't really get this. basically I didn't know where to get that knowledge from.
Yeah.
And so what I did back then, and I think that was a great shift in my PhD, and that I simply sat out and asked people, like, how can I learn this?
Yeah.
And so, for example, there are people who actually were recommending books to me to read, and still to this day, like 2 of the books that I'm recommending in the Marketing Analytics 1 lecture is books that I basically read back then, and then figured out, wow, you know, these books speak to me, and these books are able to explain things better to me than my lecturers could previously, or that other books or other formats. So actually asking friends how to gain access to knowledge was really helpful to me.
Yeah.
And that was also helpful to me in another way, because then one friend who was a manager at a charity in the US, she was telling me, oh, you know, you're interested in this kind of research by this called randomized controlled trials, so how to run field experiments. And she said, oh, I know a guy who works in that. And that guy turned to be Don Green, who's one of the founders of the discipline.
Wow.
And because she organized me having a coffee with Don, I later ended up in one of his classes. And he normally teaches at Columbia University, back in the day was at Yale. And there I was in a PhD workshop with Ivy League students around me.
Wow.
And they asked the same stupid questions that I asked. So that really was very helpful to see that, as we say in German, everybody just cooks with water, you know?
Yeah.
Just because somebody goes to an Ivy League school doesn't necessarily mean that they're smarter or they have better skills. They have the same questions. And so finding people who can refer you to people who are knowledgeable, who can teach you things, and reaching out, that's something that I found really helps at solving problems in general.
That's really good advice, actually, because when you say it, I mean, it kind of sounds obvious to like reach out, but I think nobody really does it, or I don't really do it because it kind of feels uncommon, unusual to do so. But hearing that story, I mean, that's the best proof that we can get, right?
Yeah, I mean, back in the day when I was a student here, it was very, very uncommon. So I was the first generation who did their bachelor's degree.
Oh, yeah.
And it was very uncommon to switch schools after their master's degree.
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays many people go abroad to master's programs, but still we don't really see students ending up in like Ivy League schools or going to the States. That's still quite rare.
Yeah.
And of course, there are many factors, finances being one of them, and also like maybe there are certain ways how other schools help funnel students into those Ivy League schools, for example. But a lot of times, you know, I meet extremely smart students in the undergraduate degree, of course also in the graduate degree program, and it's just not considered their evoked set.
Yeah.
You know, as we in marketing say, like, what's your evoked set of options? And then saying, hey, let's apply at Harvard, let's apply at Columbia or at Stanford. It's simply not in the realm of what they consider manageable. And so my suggestion is that if there's a program, a grad student program, grad school program that you find really interesting, no matter where it's in the world, whether the US, Japan, Korea, Australia, go for it.
Yeah.
The worst thing that can happen is that somebody says no. And then, but at least you've tried. It's important to scratch that itch.
Okay, I hope you all listened carefully. Now, I mean, that's super interesting, but let's change topics a bit.
Of course.
And now let's talk politics. Political marketing is the core of your research, so we're sitting here with the expert. Could you explain to us, just for starters, what political marketing is and why it is relevant today?
So political marketing deals with the exchanges that's happening in the political marketplace. And so these are mostly exchanges between the stakeholders. So you have politicians and political parties on the one side and voters or citizens on the other, and also other stakeholders such as government, so ministries, NGOs, the media, and so on. And so we actually look at and analyze the exchange relationships. So for example, you can compare it to the standard marketing, commercial marketing scenario where people go out, for example, to a coffee shop, buy a cup of coffee and pay with their credit card or with basically some euros from their wallet. In politics, we don't deal in this exchange relationship with euros. As voters, we vote with our entire wallet. And everybody has the same wallet. Everybody has the same vote.
That's a good metaphor.
And it's not like that you can actually buy a politician, like certain policies. You can say, hey, you know, I like the policies from the Greens, but I like the politicians from the CDU, and I like the style of the FDP, and maybe the social conscience of the SPD. No, you have certain bundles that are on the market. And these are not like products like coffee, but they sell something like an insurance. So basically you vote for somebody because you hope that if problems show up, they will be able to deal with that and deal with that in a way how you want them to deal with it. And that's basically, from a political marketing perspective, our elections.
Oh, that's a really nice metaphor. I think I understood it nicely. I do really think that marketing and politics, it's like a combination I've personally never heard of before looking you up for this interview. But I feel like it's super interesting and super relevant, especially today in our times, January 2025. So yeah. Next question. Talking about like the social identity of politicians, have you seen any major rhetorical or strategic changes in the elections from the politicians or the parties in general?
That's a really good question. Thanks for this question. Actually, if you look, you can really see a shift that is getting more and more prominent, in that politicians are trying to appeal not to the minds of people in a sense of through their rationality, but they use emotionality quite often. They use emotions, and they use anger, for example, as a very powerful emotion. And what I said earlier about the social identities, you see with certain politicians that they are actively trying to promote an us versus them agenda. So it's an in-group versus out-group agenda. That's what we actually have got a study on that also right now. It's in the process of publication. Where politicians are saying, okay, you know, you as a citizen, as a voter, you are like me, you are like us, and we are fighting against these other people. And so they ostracize the so-called out-group, they ostracize other groups of people, and that unfortunately is actually quite effective. It is because it appeals to our basically tribal human mind, and using emotions like anger or fear against outgroups is unfortunately getting more and more frequent. And I would wish for citizens to figure out that, you know, they hear politicians using that and realize that, okay, I might be moved by that message emotionally, but this is a politician who tries to fearmonger, it's a politician who tries to cause a division in society that actually is not there, because maybe somebody, another citizen, was born in another country than me, but you know, they are a business student like me, they are young like me. It's actually, there's more than unites, there's more that unites us than separates us. So my appeal would be to everybody out there, to every citizen, to every voter, to hear these messages and then be aware that somebody is trying to maybe motivate you to do something that goes against what you basically believe in.
Talking about like the anger in politics, I mean, trust is also declining in politics globally. How can you use your knowledge and expertise in political marketing to help build the credibility back and the trust among voters?
Thank you very much also for this question. Also a really important question that I get asked quite often by political practitioners. I think this us versus them mentality is also quite frequent when people talk about politics. You know, we as citizens and they as politicians, they as political class. And in certain countries, you need to be rich to go into politics. In Germany, you don't. Everybody can become a member of a party that he or she thinks represents their values and thus become an active politician. And I think it's very important to build on the human connections between politicians and citizens. So one of the studies that I actually have conducted during 2 elections, one 3 years ago and one 2 years ago, was that I actually went on the street with politicians, people who were running for office, and we knocked on doors and talked to citizens. And for both politicians, both seasoned politicians, amazing parliamentarians who had been working in parliament for a long time already, that was the first time to go out and knock on doors. And the interesting experience for them also was that, you know, I was working with a party who typically does not gain that high of a vote share in elections, and even though a lot of people we met at the doorstep were not at that time voters of that party, everybody treated each other with respect. And so I think it's easy to be mad, and sometimes also rightfully mad at politicians when they're far away, but having a personal relationship and basically talk to them on the doorstep and say, like, I like what you stand for, but I didn't really like how you implemented this, or I don't really feel that you represent people like us anymore, like me and my neighbors. That's very powerful.
Yeah.
Because it also gives the politician the question to ask, hey, but if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Like, what do you think, what can I learn?
Yeah.
Politicians are not perfect. They can't be perfect. Nobody is perfect. And if a politician has an open mindset to learn and how to make things better and basically do marketing analytics, like going out there, talking to voters and then deriving their own inference and looking into, hey, so maybe I can learn something and make better policies. I think that's very, very powerful. So bridging that divide also, I hope, would improve trust in politicians when they're actually actively showing that they're not just there for show, but they really listen and want to learn.
That seems very understandable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get back to the questions.
Sure. Thanks so much.
Talking about politics, what do you think? How has social media influenced political campaigns in recent years? Are there any trends that stand out to you?
Well, depends certainly on how you define recent years. What you can see is that politics has become a lot more intermediate and also interactive.
Yeah.
So people now feel like they follow politicians on Instagram, on TikTok, and they get a glimpse into their private lives.
Yeah.
Whereas previously, you would only see politicians on TV or read newspaper interviews. So I think users who are also citizens and who are also voters, they actually also have a very high degree of sensitivity to authenticity, which is very important. So they feel when a politician is not authentic.
Yeah.
And so that's also something we learned from research, is that authenticity is key. If you're behaving in a way that is not natural to us, people see that. And also, but they feel that the citizens feel that they can comment right away.
Yeah.
And so they can also have interactive exchanges with politicians online. And I think that is very, very powerful.
Yeah.
And so that basically gets, or should theoretically get, politicians and voters closer together again.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. Scrolling through my Instagram feed, suddenly seeing reels of chancellor candidates talking to us and like having the possibility to comment. I feel like, I mean, I'm only like a second-time voter, so I don't really have the experience yet, but it feels more personal and closer. And I feel like that's a change from what I have been seeing being younger. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. That being said, let's be careful with the causal claims. I mean, some of the things that we learn in marketing analytics is when somebody says X causes Y, is that really the case? And so back in the day, we've had several scandals of people saying like of reports like, hey, this ad influenced or manipulated voters. Causal claims on that are quite, let's say, not that very well supported. So if you think about the Cambridge Analytica scandal, if you look at the way how people actually gathered data, used voters' data to allegedly manipulate elections, we as researchers don't think that the campaigns that they did with Cambridge Analytica actually got to the election of Donald Trump back in the day. But there's several other factors. And if you look into media, if you're out there, you see one clip, you get one ad. Do you really think that this changes the entire behavior, changes your belief system into voting a party that you wouldn't vote for? So one has to be careful. And of course, the platforms, the big platforms, because they sell advertising space, they would love politicians to believe that you put out an Instagram ad, you put out a TikTok dance video, and people will fall for you and vote for you. It's not that easy. I think we have to be vigilant and we have to be critical consumers. So the same way how you would look at your favorite influencers who try to sell a product to you, I think we should also look at politicians. They're like, okay, they have a very snappy video, with high production content. But look at their policies and look at what they're trying to sell to you. And you're the one who votes with their wallet. Your vote is as valuable as the vote of any startup millionaire in Berlin. So you as a student have the same wallet size this one time. So spend that wallet wisely. That's my appeal to everybody.
Wow, that's very important. Then somebody, when we asked for questions for this interview, somebody said that political marketing seems manipulative. I mean, when you don't really know what it is, it might appear that way, but now we wanted to ask you, how can campaigns balance persuasion with ethical communication? Is there a line? Is it defined, or is it like everybody does whatever they want?
So I think, persuasion, what we have found out in empirical political marketing research is persuading somebody to switch their party allegiance is very, very hard. Mm-hmm. And sometimes considering the budget that parties have to reach out and the actual possibility to reach out to voters, I would say sometimes is close to impossible to have this one ad that convinces somebody. Yeah. So persuasion is very, very hard. And I think it's not that easy to manipulate people. Mm-hmm. I think what political marketing can do, what is questionable is creating an environment of fear, of insecurity, and then trying to make voters feel less sure about their personal safety, of the safety of their loved ones, and then use fear-mongering in order to make it easier for people to maybe then create a narrative. But it's tough, although some parties and some politicians are doing that in Germany and other countries around the world. I think where I would definitely think parties cross the line is when you use lies, when you use untruth. When you give statements that you know that they are not true. I mean, nobody knows everything, nobody knows the entire truth. But if you as a politician, as a party, actively use knowledge that you know to be untrue to convince somebody, I think that is an ethical line that we should definitely not cross. Definitely. But that's the same thing in marketing. If you go out and try to market a product, lying about the product will not help you. If you basically hawk a product as an influencer on Instagram and everybody buys it and then they realize, this product is really, really bad, they will find out. And this is basically your reputation will suffer under that. So both in commercial marketing and in political marketing, don't lie about what you're trying to sell, and don't lie about in general.
Okay, thank you. Talking about developing like a sense whether someone is being truthful or whatever, how can students develop a deeper understanding of political marketing? Do you have any books, articles, or resources that you can recommend for the students if they want to know more? So
first of all, I always recommend to read outside of your comfort zone. I mean, nobody reads an entire newspaper every day. I know from my students, I know from my student assistants that news consumptions nowadays happens a lot through social media, and I think it sometimes is good to be outside of our comfort zone. So I, for example, follow a lot of politicians that I don't agree with. So sometimes it helps me to see like, oh yes, most definitely this is the politician that I would never vote for, but it's good to see that the reasons why I would never vote for them. But to be out of the comfort zone, because maybe sometimes what you like is a label of a party, if you like what the things they stand for, but getting to know more about politicians from other parties, I think really helps. And if it just helps to hone your own argument, but not just to follow one side of the argument is very helpful. Also in the media, I personally, when I started working in politics and I worked in the federal parliament, my boss told me that my job would be to tell her things in international politics that before they happen in the German news. And keyword there is the German part, because the international narrative is sometimes really helpful. As students of mine in marketing analytics know, because I mentioned that quite frequently in the lecture, I'm a huge fan of The Economist, which is a British publication, international publication, and I still read The Economist every week because it gives you a perspective that is not German. It gives you a bit of not a neutral perspective, but an outsider's perspective. And so it helps to sometimes to get perspective from outside the narrative. So that's providing daily consumption of the news. Like if you follow politicians and newspapers on Twitter or on TikTok, maybe give it a try for these elections, follow politicians that you think you don't really agree with or that you're curious about. A follow doesn't mean that you support them, right? But it exposes you to maybe a different narrative. And
that's
it helps.
A great point. Getting oneself out of one's bubble.
Out of one's comfort zone, exactly. I think that's very, very powerful. And if you then say, I can't stand the position anymore after elections, it's also all right to unfollow. Getting to books, so if you're interested, so there's one book that I really like that I always give actually as a present to all of my student assistants and also to politicians that I work with. It's called Get Out the Vote. It's by one of my academic teachers, Don Green, who I studied with from Columbia. Basically, it tells you about what we know about why people turn out I think it's very powerful, but that's also like an offer to our students in general. So if you're a student, no matter whether you have already taken marketing analytics or not, or whether you're going to take marketing analytics, so we are, if you're interested in politics and you're also interested in marketing, we are a very small group. So there are people who say already in the first lecture in marketing analytics, yes, we love marketing, we want to focus on marketing, and those analytical methods don't scare us away, but we will see our future in marketing. But there's many people who also don't, and that's fine, you know. It's also as a student, I wasn't a big fan of controlling, I wasn't a big fan of accounting, and still I had to do that in my degree. That's why we study business. But if then at the same time you're interested in marketing and in politics, just reach out to me. I'll be happy to give you, just write to me like what you're interested in. I'll be happy to give book advice, I'll be happy to give reading advice, and I'm also really interested and curious in meeting students who already at this early stage in the study say, this could be something I could see myself working in, either on the practitioner side or also on the researcher side. So if product marketing interests you, just drop me a line, send me an email, or walk up to me after the lecture. I'm always really curious in meeting students and meeting the students who are interested in vertical marketing. That's always a treat every single time I teach my lectures.
Wow, what an opportunity. Thank you so much on behalf of all of the students.
You're welcome.
That's everything than ordinary. That's like very special. So thank you very much.
You. Thanks for giving me the possibility to reach out to the students who are interested in political marketing.
We can put your email down in the description so that people can find you easier.
Perfect.
Okay, we'll do that. Somebody wanted to know, well, he said you do a lot. You do research, you teach, and you do have a personal life. And all of that can be very challenging. How do you manage your time effectively, and how can you stay productive with all of those different things?
That's a very good question. The question that I ask myself on an almost daily basis. So being an assistant professor is one of the most busy times of an academic's life. So if you're trying to become a full professor at some point, you have to produce good research and good teaching over the time that you're an assistant professor. So I signed up for this knowing that I wouldn't have a lot of free time. I mean, at the same time, also I'm a founder, so I run a company. At the same time, I have even less time. And when I look into doing research, it's there's not that much time that is left over for like personal things. So I love to travel, so that's when I take a kick back, and I think that sometimes traveling really gives me also the possibility to take a step back and reflect on what I'm doing, and so that really helps me quite a lot. So I just came back from 1 week on a private trip to Pakistan, and before that I was going for a conference in Australia and also passed by Singapore for work, so for research. And so these trips really help me. But one also has to be like careful that one gets enough sleep, one eats well, and takes generally care, and nobody wants us to burn out. And that's something that I'm trying to instill also in our amazing PhD students. So we have amazing PhD students at the Marketing Center and the people I work with every day. And so today we tape on a Monday. I was in the office yesterday on a Sunday. I wasn't the only one. And so we do that because we love what we do. This is a great job. It's a privilege. I mean, I'm a civil servant. So I'm a civil servant of the state of North Rhine-Westphalia as an assistant professor. And I consider this job as a great privilege that I'm allowed to teach young, smart, ambitious students like you. And I'm also allowed to conduct research without having to hustle for money or for budget from parties or from organizations. I can work independently, and that's a great feature of assistant. I'm very grateful for that. And if that means that I have to spend a couple of weekends in the office every month, I'm very fine with that. I love what I do, and I think it's a great privilege.
And now we're already at our last question, and I think it's like the basic question for the end. If you could give students or anyone listening basically one piece of advice, it could be about anything, about life, about studying, or something completely else, what would you say? What would it be?
So I think I dished already quite some advice before. So certainly don't go for a job that go for a job that you have a chance of liking. And generally, I think I can summarize this to do something you love. Or try to do something you love, and try to figure out what you like and what you don't like. So back in the day, before studying, so I was interested in a lot of different fields. So I was already actively working in politics as an activist, as a volunteer, never got paid for it. And so I thought, okay, maybe I should study political science. And then I realized, but I love politics, something really interests me, but I also really love the entrepreneurial attitude and the marketing approach and the behavioral attitude about business. And I'm very happy that I did. But I also met a lot of people who study business because their teachers told them to study business, because it's a sound thing to do. And of course, that's good advice. Like people try to help you, but if you do something you love and you're really passionate about, you automatically have the chance to be good at it. And when I look at colleagues who have fulfilling careers in research, but also in practice, doing something that you really love enables you to be really good at it. And when you're good at it, you get better grades, you get better internships, you get more experience. And I think that's like a really nice way how to reiterate being better at something and also enjoying what you're doing. And so I think being honest to yourself about what you love, what you don't love, and doing something you love is really important. And if what you love is marketing or political marketing, we really hope that we can fuel that love. Not everything about marketing is, from a student perspective, really interesting as a start. But I wouldn't teach the methods that I'm teaching if I wasn't convinced that the majority of them really helps you in your job later. It makes you more critical thinkers, both as an employee, as a manager later, and also as a citizen. And so knowing about causality, knowing about how to use data and how to make better decisions, that is something that we're trying to provide. And thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for these really interesting questions. Thanks for the students who asked the questions. I wasn't aware that they were so interested in what I have to say. Besides exam advice. But thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And thanks so much for having me. Pleasure and an honor.
We want to thank you for your time, for your enthusiasm, and for your interesting input. I learned a lot today, and I hope you guys did too. And thank you for showing us this great place. And we hope to talk to you sooner or later again.
Definitely.
With another cup of coffee.
Or we will see each other in Marketing 1 in the next semester. That's not meant as a threat. Thank you so much, Laura. I had a lot of fun. It's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.